We are joined by our Senior Advisor for National Security and Foreign Policy, Ric Grenell. And Rick, I want to go right to you with this because Iran has felt, obviously, the public pressure because their Attorney General has announced that they have disbanded their morality police, the one that was responsible for the death of one of the protesters that led to this explosion of protests. Now, we have no idea if that's actually the case, if this has actually been done. But I do think it is a small victory that they felt like they had to make an announcement like that to the world.
Look, I think the reality is that it's baloney. There's no possible way they're getting rid of the morality police. Remember that the morality police are actually this outside group that works with the government, and they don't officially wear police uniforms, but they are the enforcers. And so this is, a religious problem. The regime is a radical religious regime, and they're never going to be able to get rid of their supporters or the desire to control people's behavior. I think what's more shameful is that while we're watching people take to the streets, the U.S. media fell for this and they jumped fast. I mean, I saw some headlines from NBC saying possible change to women's rights, all because the regime said something. Look, the regime has told us that they're not making nuclear weapons. The regime told us that they don't support terrorism. The regime told us that gay people don't exist. This is a regime that lies consistently.
It was interesting, Rick, because at the same time, you had that they, say the morality police have been done away with. The Biden administration, through the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, basically said the negotiations with the Iranians is not happening now. And the reason it's not happening now is, ready for this? They don't trust what the Iranians are doing. So here we are. Shock.
I mean, it's totally laughable because it's the message that the Trump team has been telling the Biden team for years is, how can you believe the Iranian regime? They've lied about heavy water. They've lied about the number of centrifuges. They've lied about supporting terrorism. The Israelis caught them with this closet full of information showing that they had lied. The Europeans were embarrassed for supporting them. But you know who hasn't been embarrassed? The Biden administration. They've believed in trying to find some solution. It's this John Kerry theory that if the Iranians tell you that they only have a certain number of centrifuges, you're supposed to believe them. And then when they lower the number, you applaud, even though we don't know what the number of centrifuges they had to start with because they've lied from the beginning. But, this is typical of John Kerry. They value consensus rather than the protection of American values and security.
Rick, let me ask you this also, changing gear here. Big disclosure with Twitter by Elon Musk, showing the suppression of basically voting information on one side. We found through our work at the ACLJ and our Freedom of Information Act, and I don't even get a chance to tell you this yet, but that the General Counsel of the FBI, James Baker, you of course remember that name from your days, James Baker, General Counsel for the FBI, ends up becoming the Associate General Counsel when he leaves the government to guess where? Twitter. And he is of course, he was the Russia collusion narrative. He was the whole Mueller probe. That was all under James Baker as the General Counsel of the FBI. He ends up at Twitter, and guess who they're communicating with at Twitter per Elon Musk? Now, we know it was Baker's involvement because of our FOIA request. We know of the Twitter engagement with James Baker because Elon Musk disclosed. How significant was this?
I mean, it's huge. It's Swamp Lawyer 101, and you know this better than anyone. There's all of these lawyers who just sit around and do the work of the left, and they're pretty good at it. But they're not interested in the Constitution. They're not interested in freedom of speech. They're interested in controlling us and crushing dissent, which is, I have to say, one of the reasons I came to ACLJ is to be able to get away from the swampy lawyers and go with people who are fighting for Americans. And so I hope people recognize that all of our FOIA requests, all of our pushing are from lawyers who are outside of Washington, D.C., who have the interest of the American people at hand, and we're fighting hard. You should support us.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Rick, because we're not matching challenge campaign, so this is a big month. But I will also say this. This FOIA litigation, Rick knows this. He's been on both ends of it because of his government as the Director of National Intelligence, of course, assisting us with with these matters. This one dates back almost 2.5 years of litigation to get this information, and we wouldn't have seen the causal connective, the James Baker element of this, unless we had that FOIA request. So it was a big disclosure. We keep saying this. Andy Economo, our senior counsel, keeps saying this. It's you're going through this haystack of information to get to find the needle. The nugget in the gold mine. It's the same thing. But when you push, you get every one of these cases. We have found something significant. Jordan?
Rick, I think all of us involved in politics, we're hearing different things on the ground. We got one final Senate race tomorrow will be decided. And the outcome will really, the bigger issue is how committees will be set up in the Senate. Democrats will still be in control, but the way committees are set up, it could be still tied if Herschel Walker is able to pull out a victory. I'm not hearing great things on the ground. I think we have to get a big Republican same-day turnout again because the early voting by Democrats is like in the 1.8 million number. But what are you hearing from sources on the ground? Because I think every Republican I know of has been in that state in the last month or so trying to help.
Look, I think that everybody that's listening to our voice should absolutely pick up the phone and call someone who lives in Georgia and ask them, have you voted yet? And make sure that they do. This is our network. This is how we can actually do, ballot harvesting like strategies. And so every single person who is connected to Georgia needs to be calling Georgia voters. We need to have a massive voter turnout. This is an incredibly important race. We're trying to convince people, but it's all about people recognizing that they've got to make it a priority to vote. We have to vote, and we can make a big difference.
Let's go ahead and take Lynn's call from Georgia, because I think this is part of the issue that we'll be able to put to rest a little bit here while we got Rick on the phone.
Hey, Lynn, welcome to Secular. You're on the air.
I just wanted to know, we still got one more day of voting tomorrow, and I just wondering why Real Clear Politics has already got Warnock already winning at 50.7 to 49.3.
Yeah, so this is the headline in Real Clear Politics, and it says Georgia Senate runoff. Then it has parentheses, University of Massachusetts, Lowell, Warnock 51, Walker 46. That is a poll. That is not, early votes have not been, we haven't gotten an early vote report other than we know that the turnout, Rick, has been breathtaking in number. I think 1.8 million votes have already been cast. But that's why you can't lose hope, folks, because that's a poll. That's not the actual data. Rick?
Look, the polls are always wrong. And what we have to be able to do is finish what we started, which many Republicans vote on Election Day. I wish that they would vote earlier so that we could have no excuse voting. I know people who fully intend to vote on Election Day, and then the doctor's appointment comes up, or they were in a car crash, or their kid gets sick. And so we have to avoid that as much as possible. But now we need an army of people flooding those polls. There's going to be long lines. So when you wait to the end, it's going to take you more time, and you just got to be prepared to do that. But you have to do that. Your vote matters. This is going to come down to a very close race. Get out and vote.
Jordan said this, Rick, and Jordan, I think it's worth repeating again. We've got to start participating in early voting and mail-in ballots and all of whatever the state law allows, because we're starting the ball game and they're on our 20-yard line.
It's something I've been talking to our ACLJ action teams. We've expanded that team. So I said, going into the next election cycle, I think we need to do a nationwide effort that breaks down early voting state by state for people, and to encourage it from the ACLJ as ACLJ action, from lawyers that they trust, from policy experts that people have trusted with their financial support for years. So if we tell them, hey, we're not telling you who to vote for, but this is early voting in your state, you've got to take advantage of it. And we're talking about some of this through ads, some of this through actually going into states and hosting meetings on early voting to push back against this unfortunate narrative that it can't be trusted, and the confusion between absentee voting, where you are reliant on the Postal Service, which I don't like that as much, but with actually going to a precinct where they're open and casting a vote the exact same way you would on Election Day.
Rick, we appreciate it as always, but you want to encourage people to vote. One last time here, encourage folks to get out. Tomorrow's it.
Yeah, I think what Jordan said is key. We've seen races. I mean, look at the Attorney General's race in Arizona.
300 votes right now?
500 votes.
Yeah, unreal.
So get out and vote. Get out and vote. Your vote matters.
All right, Ric Grenell, Senior Advisor to the ACLJ. We appreciate it as always. And I'll tell you something. That race, that Attorney General race, is literally 500 votes. between a Republican attorney general and a Democratic attorney general. So for the consequences are gigantic.
Yeah.
And that's what people have to realize. And the consequence for the Senate is gigantic tomorrow because the Senate, it's not going to be outcome determined as far as votes in the Senate, but it is as it relates to who controls the committees.